The sun was hanging low over the twisted remains of Route 47, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt like skeletal fingers reaching out from the past. Jake Mitchell gripped the steering wheel of the beat-up Ford pickup so tight his knuckles had gone white as bone, his eyes darting between the rearview mirror and the desolate road ahead. Sitting shotgun was his younger brother, Tyler, a 22-year-old former college kid who'd been studying engineering before the whole damn world went straight to hell in a handbasket. In the back seat, pressed between duffel bags stuffed with supplies and makeshift weapons, were three others who'd become something like family over the past 8 months since the dead started walking. There was Marcus Rivera, a built-like-a-tank former construction worker from Detroit who could swing a crowbar like nobody's business, his dark eyes constantly scanning for threats. Beside him sat Amanda Price, a sharp-tongued nurse from Dallas who'd saved more lives than she could count with nothing but duct tape, prayer, and sheer stubborn determination. And squeezed against the far window was Kevin Zhang, a wiry tech genius who could hotwire anything with a battery and had gotten them out of more jams than Jake cared to remember. They'd been on the road for 3 days straight, running low on gas, lower on food, and damn near out of hope when Tyler spotted the faded green sign half hidden by overgrown kudzu vines. Ashford Springs, population 3,847 it read, though that number didn't mean squat anymore in a world where the population was divided into two groups, the living and the living dead. Jake eased off the gas pedal, letting the truck slow to a crawl as they approached the turnoff. The town wasn't on any of their maps, which was weird considering they'd scavenged a whole collection of atlases and road guides from abandoned gas stations and picked over rest stops. Marcus leaned forward from the back seat, his deep voice rumbling with concern. "Man, I don't know about this. Place gives me the heebie-jeebies already and we ain't even rolled up yet." Amanda smacked his shoulder, her ponytail swishing as she turned to look at the overgrown road leading into the town. "Everything gives you the heebie-jeebies, Marcus. Last week you nearly jumped out of your skin because of a damn raccoon." Marcus grunted, not denying it. That raccoon was acting shady as hell and you know it. Kevin had his nose buried in a tablet he'd rigged to run off a solar charger, his fingers swiping through downloaded files and archived websites he'd grabbed back when the internet was still functioning in patches. "This is weird, guys. Like, really weird. I can't find anything about Ashford Springs online. No Wikipedia entry, no town website, not even a mention in any news articles. It's like the place never existed." Tyler twisted in his seat to look back at Kevin, his sandy hair falling into his eyes. Maybe it was just too small? Lots of little towns don't have much online presence. But Kevin shook his head, his expression troubled. "Nah, man. Every town has something. Traffic stops, property records, somebody's blog about visiting their grandma there. This place? It's a complete ghost town in the digital world." Amanda laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Well, it's probably a ghost town in the real world too now. Question is, do we check it out or keep burning through our last quarter tank of gas hoping to find something better down the road?" Jake sat there for a long moment, engine idling, weighing their options. They'd passed through a dozen dead towns over the past months, each one picked clean by survivors or overrun by the walking corpses that used to be neighbors, friends, family. But something about this place felt different. The air itself seemed heavier somehow, pressing against the windows of the truck like it was trying to keep them out or maybe trying to warn them off. Still, they needed supplies desperately. Their last real score had been almost 2 weeks back, and they'd been stretching every can of beans, every bottle of water, every bullet like it might be their last. Because it very well could be. "We goin' careful," Jake finally said, his voice carrying the weight of leadership he'd never asked for but had shouldered anyway. "Quick sweep of the main street, look for a pharmacy, grocery store, maybe a hardware shop. We load up fast and get the hell out before dark. Nobody goes anywhere alone, and at the first sign of a horde, we bail. Everybody good with that?" The agreement was unanimous, though Marcus muttered something under his breath about bad feelings and stupid decisions that got people killed. Jake couldn't blame him. They'd all seen what happened when you got too comfortable, too careless. Hell, they'd lost good people that way. Sarah and Tom back in Oklahoma, Linda in that clusterfuck outside Little Rock, old man Peterson who'd insisted on going back for his wife's photo album and never came back at all. Every loss carved itself into Jake's memory like scars on his soul, reminders that out here, one mistake was all it took. He guided the truck onto the access road, branches scraping against the sides like fingernails on a coffin lid. The vegetation had gone absolutely wild without human maintenance, kudzu and Virginia creeper swallowing up road signs and guardrails, making everything look like the forest was actively trying to reclaim what humanity had briefly borrowed. The road curved through a tunnel of overhanging trees, the canopy so thick it blocked out the late afternoon sun and plunged them into a green-tinted twilight that made Tyler unconsciously check his pistol and Marcus grip his crowbar tighter. Then, just as suddenly as they'd entered the natural tunnel, they emerged into the town proper, and Jake's foot hit the brake without conscious thought. Holy shit, Tyler breathed, and for once, nobody told him to watch his language. Ashford Springs spread out before them like something from a time capsule or maybe a museum exhibit. The main street was lined with brick buildings that looked like they'd been standing since before World War II, their facades decorated with painted advertisements for products that probably hadn't existed in decades. A vintage movie theater with an Art Deco marquee stood on one corner, the letters spelling out some movie from what looked like the 1980s. Across the street, a 5-and-dime store's windows were still intact, displaying mannequins and outdated clothing styles. An old-fashioned pharmacy, a hardware store with rakes and shovels still hanging outside, a diner with a neon sign shaped like a coffee cup. Everything looked frozen in time, preserved like somebody had just walked away one day and never came back. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was how intact everything looked. No broken windows, no burned-out buildings, no cars crashed into storefronts or bodies sprawled in the streets. In every other town they'd passed through, the apocalypse had left its mark in shattered glass, bloodstains, and scattered belongings. Here, it was like the end of the world had just politely passed by without stopping. "This ain't right," Marcus said flatly. 8 months of hell and this place looks like it's ready for a Norman Rockwell painting. Where are the wrecks? Where are the bodies? Where are the damn zombies? Amanda was leaning forward, her medic's eyes cataloging details. Look at the power lines. They're old, really old. And is that a payphone? She pointed to a corner where indeed an honest-to-God phone booth stood, something Jake hadn't seen outside of old movies in years. Kevin was frantically tapping at his tablet. "Guys, I'm getting no signal here. Not that that's unusual, but I mean no signal of any kind. My GPS won't even ping. It's like we drove into a dead zone." Jake put the truck in gear and crept forward down Main Street, all of them scanning the buildings and shadowed alleys for movement. The place was silent as a tomb, not even the sound of wind or birds or the usual groaning and shuffling that announced a zombie presence. Their tires crunched on asphalt that was cracked and weathered but clear of debris, the sound obscenely loud in the stillness. They passed a barber shop with a spinning pole still mounted outside, a clothing store called Millie's Fashions, a bank with impressive columns and a bronze plaque that read established 1923. Everything was neat, ordered, waiting. Tyler pointed to the pharmacy. "That's our target, right? Let's grab what we can and bounce." But Jake was looking at something else, a detail that made his stomach clench with unease. Every single building had its door closed. Not boarded up, not broken open, just closed like the owners had locked up for the night and went home. In his experience, that never happened. Looters, survivors, the infected themselves, somebody always broke in, tore through places looking for supplies or shelter or prey. He pulled the truck to a stop in front of the pharmacy, a place called Hartley's Drugs according to the hand-painted sign in the window. For a long moment, Nobody moved, everybody just staring at the dark interior beyond the glass, trying to see what might be waiting inside. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "All right, let's do this quick and dirty. In and out, just like Jake said. Amanda, you know what meds we need. Kevin, you're with her watching her back. Tyler, you and me will secure the entrance and keep eyes on the street. Jake, you're on overwatch from out here." It was a solid plan, the kind they'd executed 100 times before. But as they piled out of the truck, weapons at the ready, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His eyes swept the windows of the surrounding buildings, looking for the telltale shadow of movement, the pale face of a zombie pressed against glass, anything. There was nothing. Just empty windows reflecting the dying light like dead eyes. Marcus tried the pharmacy door and found it unlocked, which should have been convenient but instead just felt wrong. The door swung inward with a creak of hinges that sounded like a scream in the quiet, and the smell that wafted out made them all take a step back. Not the expected reek of death and decay, but something else. Dust, old paper, and underneath it something almost sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. Amanda pulled her bandana up over her nose anyway, a habit from too many encounters with decomposing corpses. "Let's make it quick," she said, her voice muffled by the cloth. She and Kevin disappeared into the gloom of the pharmacy, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Marcus positioned himself in the doorway, his crowbar resting on his shoulder, eyes constantly moving. Tyler posted up by the truck, his pistol held low but ready, and Jake climbed into the truck bed for a better vantage point. The minutes crawled by like hours. Jake's eyes ached from the intensity of scanning every shadow, every dark window, every alley entrance. The sun was sinking lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if they weren't also a countdown to darkness. And darkness meant death out here. The infected were active during the day, sure, but at night they were worse somehow, more aggressive, harder to see coming. He was just starting to think they might actually pull this off without incident when Tyler hissed up at him. "Jake, 3 o'clock, the hardware store. Did you see that?" Jake swung around, his rifle coming up to his shoulder, eyes locking on the hardware store's front window. For a second, he didn't see anything. Then there was movement, just a flicker, like someone stepping back from the glass real quick. "I saw it," he confirmed, his heart rate kicking up a notch. "Marcus, we got possible contact. Hardware store across the street." Marcus shifted his position, angling to watch both the pharmacy interior and the street. "Zeke," he called out, using their shorthand for zombies. "Or breather?" That was the million-dollar question. Another survivor could be a threat or a potential ally, but the infected were always a threat, no discussion. Jake kept his rifle trained on the window, finger resting alongside the trigger guard, not on the trigger yet. "Can't tell." "Tyler, circle around the truck, get a different angle." Tyler moved smooth and low, the way they'd all learned to move, making himself a smaller target. He got into position beside the truck's front wheel, his pistol aimed at the hardware store. "I got nothing," he reported. Maybe it was just a reflection or something. But Jake knew what they'd seen, and reflections didn't move like that. He was about to call for Amanda and Kevin to abort and get back to the truck when the pharmacy's interior suddenly lit up with the beam of a flashlight sweeping wildly, followed by Kevin's voice, high and tight with fear. Guys. You need to see this shit right now." Marcus was through the door in a heartbeat, and Jake vaulted out of the truck bed, torn between the threat at the hardware store and whatever had Kevin freaking out. Tyler made the decision for him, keeping his weapon trained on the suspicious building while Jake rushed into the pharmacy. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town drugstore from maybe 40 years ago. Long counters with ancient cash registers, spinning racks of greeting cards yellowed with age, shelves stocked with medications and first aid supplies that would have been a gold mine under normal circumstances. But Kevin and Amanda weren't looking at the supplies. They were gathered at The back of the store, near the pharmacy counter, staring at something on the wall. Jake pushed past Marcus to see what had them spooked, and his breath caught in his throat. It was a calendar. An old-fashioned paper calendar with a picture of a kitten in a basket. And it was turned to September 1985. But that wasn't the kicker. The kicker was that every single day from September 1st to September 15th was crossed off in red pen, neat little X's marking the passage of time. And on September 16th, someone had written in careful, precise handwriting, "They came. God help us. They came." The rest of the month was blank, no more X's, no more notations, just white squares marching toward October. Amanda's voice was barely a whisper. That's almost 40 years ago. The zombies didn't happen until 8 months back. What the hell does this mean? Kevin was already moving, his flashlight beam sweeping over the rest of the pharmacy counter. Look, there's more. He illuminated a notebook lying open beside the calendar, its pages covered in that same precise handwriting. Jake reached out and carefully turned the notebook toward him, reading aloud the entries that became increasingly frantic as they progressed. September 1st, 1985, another quiet day. Martha came in for her blood pressure medication. Told her she needs to take it regularly, not just when she remembers. September 2nd, radio's been acting strange all day. Nothing but static on most channels. Weather service says there's some kind of atmospheric disturbance. September 5th, the Henderson family didn't come to church today. Neither did the Pattersons or the Ryans. Tom says maybe there's a flu going around. September 8th, something is very wrong. People are acting strange. Mrs. Chin attacked her husband in broad daylight. He's in Doc Morrison's office now, says she bit him like an animal. This isn't the flu. Jake's hands were shaking as he turned the page. September 12th, we're barricaded in our homes. The things outside used to be our neighbors, our friends. They don't talk anymore, don't think. They just hunt. Mayor Carlisle tried to call for help, but the phones are dead. So is the radio. So is everyone who got bit. Then they get back up again. September 15th, we're going to make a run for it tomorrow. Everyone who's left. We'll head for the highway, try to reach the next town, get help. If anyone finds this, if anyone reads this, don't stay in Ashford Springs. The town is cursed. The town is. The entry stopped mid-sentence, like whoever was writing had been interrupted or dragged away. The rest of the pages were blank. Marcus let out a long, shaky breath. You're telling me this place had a zombie outbreak in 1985? That's impossible. This whole thing started 8 months ago, some virus or infection or whatever that came out of nowhere and spread like wildfire. It didn't exist 40 years ago. But Kevin was shaking his head, his face pale in the flashlight beam. What if it did? What if whatever happened here was like a test run or a precursor or something? What if Ashford Springs was patient zero and everybody just forgot about it or covered it up, or Amanda cut him off, practical as always? Or what if this is bullshit? Some kind of prank or a story someone made up? We're standing in the middle of a pharmacy full of supplies we desperately need, getting spooked by some old notebook that could have been written last week for all we know. She had a point, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness that had been with him since they'd first spotted the town sign. He looked around the pharmacy with new eyes, seeing details he'd missed before. The layer of dust on everything was thick, undisturbed, the kind of accumulation that took years, not months. The medications on the shelves had packaging he didn't recognize, brands he'd never heard of. And in the corner, half hidden behind a display of canes and walkers, was a newspaper stand holding copies of the Ashford Springs Gazette, the date clearly visible, September 14, 1985. The headline read, "Mysterious Illness Sweeps Town, Officials Urge Calm." He grabbed one of the papers, the newsprint crackling and threatening to crumble in his hands. The article talked about a sudden outbreak of violent behavior, people attacking family members, bizarre symptoms that included high fever, loss of cognitive function, and extreme aggression. Local doctors were baffled. State health officials had been contacted but hadn't arrived yet. The mayor assured everyone that the situation was under control. It was all there, the same story they'd lived through 8 months ago, playing out in black and white newsprint from 4 decades in the past. "We need to leave," Jake said, his voice tight. "Right now. Grab what you can carry, we're out in 2 minutes." Nobody argued. Amanda started shoving medications into her backpack with practiced efficiency, grabbing antibiotics, painkillers, insulin, anything that could save a life. Kevin was stuffing batteries and first aid supplies into his bag. Marcus stayed at the door, keeping watch, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his grip on the crowbar had gone white-knuckle tight. Jake was helping Kevin clear a shelf of bandages when Tyler's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie they'd set to an open channel. "Guys, we got a problem. Multiple contacts emerging from buildings. I count at least 15, maybe 20. They're not moving like normal Zeeks though. Something's off." Jake's blood ran cold. "Get to the truck, Tyler. We're coming out now." He grabbed Marcus's shoulder. "Time to go, right now." They burst out of the pharmacy into the dying light of evening, and Jake saw immediately what Tyler meant. Figures were emerging from the buildings up and down Main Street, shambling out of doorways and alleys with that distinctive jerky gait of the infected. But their clothes were wrong, decades out of style, bell-bottoms and polyester suits and floral print dresses from another era. And their state of decay was all over the map. Some looked fresh, like they'd died yesterday. Others were withered husks, skin like leather stretched over bone. A few were little more than skeletons held together by dried sinew and force of habit, but they all moved with the same hungry purpose. Tyler was already in the truck bed, firing controlled shots at the closest zombies, each crack of his pistol dropping one of the shambling corpses with a headshot. But for every one that fell, 2 more seemed to emerge from the buildings. Amanda and Kevin piled into the back seat while Marcus threw himself into the passenger side. Jake hit the driver's seat and turned the key, and his heart nearly stopped when the engine coughed, sputtered, and died. "No, no, no, come on you piece of shit," he muttered, turning the key again. The starter whined but didn't catch. Behind them, Tyler was yelling about zombies getting closer, his shots coming faster now. Marcus was leaning out the window, swinging his crowbar at a corpse in a moldy 3-piece suit that had gotten too close. The thing's jaw was hanging by a thread of rotten flesh, and it snapped at Marcus's arm with yellow teeth. "Jake, man, any time now would be great," Marcus shouted, bashing the zombie's skull in with a wet crunch. Jake pumped the gas pedal and tried again, praying to whatever god might be listening that the truck wouldn't fail them now. The engine turned over once, twice, then roared to life with a sound that was sweeter than any music. He threw the truck into reverse and stomped on the gas, tires squealing as they shot backward down Main Street. Something thumped against the tailgate, and Tyler let out a string of curses as he kicked at a zombie that had managed to grab on, its fingers scrabbling at the metal. A well-placed boot to the face sent it tumbling off, and Jake spun the wheel, executing a J-turn that would have impressed a stunt driver and probably knocked a year off everyone's life from pure terror. Then they were pointed back toward the access road, and Jake floored it. The truck rocketed forward, engine screaming, scattering zombies like bowling pins. One went under the wheels with a sickening crunch thump that Jake felt more than heard. Another bounced off the hood, leaving a smear of something foul across the windshield. Then they were hitting the access road, branches whipping at the windows as they plunged back into the tunnel of vegetation. Jake didn't let up on the gas until they'd burst back out onto Route 47 and put at least 5 miles between them and Ashford Springs. Only then did he ease off, his hands shaking so bad he could barely hold the steering wheel. Tyler climbed down from the truck bed through the sliding rear window, his face pale and splattered with blowback from his headshots. What the actual hell was that? Those zombies looked like they'd been dead for decades, but they moved just like fresh ones. How is that possible? Kevin had his tablet out again, his fingers flying over the screen. I'm trying to find anything, any record of what happened in Ashford Springs in 1985. There's got to be something, news reports, government records, something. But Amanda was staring back the way they'd come, her expression troubled. What if that's why there's no record? What if whatever happened there was covered up? The government swoops in, quarantines the whole town, maybe firebombs it or walls it off, and then just erases it from the maps. It's not like people would question one missing town, especially back before the internet when information was easier to control. Marcus shook his head slowly, processing. But that doesn't explain why the zombies are still there. If there was an outbreak in 1985, even if they covered it up, the infected would have rotted away to nothing by now. Zombies don't last 40 years. Jake thought about the corpses they'd seen, the varying states of decay. Some had looked ancient, sure, but others looked almost fresh. What if it's not that they lasted 40 years? What if whatever hit that town in 1985 never left? What if it's still there, in the water or the air or the ground, and it just keeps bringing back anyone who dies there? The truck fell silent except for the rumble of the engine and the hum of tires on asphalt. It was a terrifying thought, the idea that there might be places where the infection was literally part of the environment, where death wasn't an ending but just a transition to becoming one of those things. Kevin finally broke the silence. I found something. It's not much, but it's something. There's a declassified CDC report from 1986 about a containment operation in rural Tennessee. It doesn't name the town, but the coordinates match Ashford Springs. It says they established a quarantine perimeter and monitored the site for 6 months before determining the threat was self-contained and geographically stable. Tyler leaned over to read the screen. Self-contained and geographically stable? What does that mean? Amanda answered, her voice grim. It means they decided whatever was in that town stayed in that town, so they just left it there. They probably destroyed any roads that weren't already overgrown, erased it from maps, and forgot about it. Out of sight, out of mind. Jake felt sick. But they had to know that eventually someone might stumble across it. Hell, we almost didn't make it out, and we knew to be careful. What about some family on a road trip, or hikers, or anyone who wandered in not knowing? Marcus's voice was heavy with disgust. They didn't care, man. As long as it wasn't their problem, they didn't care. Same way the government's probably handling this current outbreak. Contain what they can, write off what they can't, and leave everybody else to deal with the consequences. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Jake knew Marcus was probably right. They'd seen enough in the past 8 months to know that the old institutions had failed, that whatever response had been planned for a crisis like this had fallen apart in the face of reality. The sun had fully set now, plunging them into darkness broken only by the truck's headlights cutting through the night. Jake kept driving, putting as much distance as possible between them and that cursed town. They needed to find a safe place to hole up for the night, somewhere they could process what they'd seen and figure out their next move. But more than that, they needed to warn people. If Ashford Springs was still out there, still infected, still dangerous after 40 years, there might be other places like it. Other forgotten towns where the dead walked and the infection lingered, waiting for some unlucky soul to stumble in. Tyler was checking his weapons, reloading magazines with practiced movements. We should mark it on a map. Make sure we never go near there again, and if we meet other survivors, we can warn them off. It was a good idea, but Kevin was already shaking his head. We need to do more than that. We need to document this, get the information out there somehow. If there are other places like Ashford Springs, people need to know. They need to understand that this outbreak might not have started 8 months ago. It might have been festering in hidden pockets for decades. Amanda pulled out their physical map, one of those big folding ones they'd been marking up with safe zones, danger areas, and supply caches. She found the area where Ashford Springs should have been and drew a large red X over it, then wrote "Contaminated, do not enter, active infection since 1985" in the margin. It wasn't much, but it was something. We can make copies, she said. Share them with any survivor groups we meet. Maybe prevent someone else from making our mistake. Jake nodded, though part of him wondered how many other mistakes were out there, waiting to be made. How many other towns had been quietly erased, their populations lost to some early version of whatever plague now consumed the world? How many government secrets were literally buried in mass graves or abandoned quarantine zones? The thought made him grip the steering wheel tighter, anger mixing with the fear. They'd all lost so much already. Families, friends, homes, the entire world they'd known. And now to find out that maybe it could have been prevented, or at least understood better, if someone had just told the truth about places like Ashford Springs. It was too much. They drove in silence for another hour before Jake spotted what looked like a church set back from the road, its white steeple visible against the star-filled sky. It was on a hill, giving them a good vantage point, and the building itself was stone, solid, defensible. "That'll do," he said, turning onto the gravel drive. "We'll check it out, make sure it's clear, then ford up for the night." The routine was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Marcus and Jake cleared the church while the others stood watch outside, checking every pew, every Sunday school classroom, every closet for threats. The place was empty and undisturbed, with hymnals still neatly tucked in the pew backs and a thin layer of dust on the altar. They'd lucked out. Once everyone was inside and the doors were secured, they set up camp in the nave, pushing pews together to form a defensive perimeter. Amanda distributed the medications they'd grabbed from Hartley's pharmacy, taking inventory and rationing what they had. It was a decent haul despite their hasty exit: antibiotics, pain relievers, bandages, antiseptic. Enough to keep them going for a while longer. Kevin set up his tablet and pulled out a portable keyboard, starting to type up everything they'd seen and learned about Ashford Springs. "I'm going to encrypt this and broadcast it on every frequency I can," he explained. "Ham radio, CB, even emergency channels. If there are other survivors out there with the equipment to receive it, they'll get the warning." Tyler was cleaning his pistol, field stripping it with mechanical precision. "You think anyone's listening anymore? Most of the radio traffic we've picked up has been automated distress signals and garbled nonsense." But Kevin just shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. But I gotta try. Information is the only weapon we have against something like this. The more people know, the better their chances." Marcus had taken first watch, positioning himself at a window where he could see the approach road. "Y'all get some rest. We'll rotate every 2 hours like usual. And Jake, man, you did good back there. Got us out alive. That's what matters." Jake wanted to believe that, wanted to feel like they'd accomplished something. But all he could think about were those zombies in their outdated clothes, those empty buildings frozen in time, that calendar marking the days until hell arrived in September 1985. He lay down on a pew, using his jacket as a pillow, and stared up at the church's vaulted ceiling. Moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting everything in muted reds and blues. "You think there are more places like that?" Tyler asked quietly from the next pew over. "Towns that got hit before the main outbreak?" Jake didn't want to answer, didn't want to voice the fear that had been growing in his gut. But they'd all sworn to be honest with each other, no matter how hard the truth was. "Yeah," he finally said. "I do. I think whatever this is, it's been around a lot longer than we knew. Maybe it comes and goes, flares up in isolated places before dying down. Or maybe it's been building, getting stronger, and 8 months ago it finally reached critical mass." Amanda's voice drifted from where she'd settled near the altar. "If that's true, if this thing has been around for decades, then there might be information out there. Research, studies, maybe even treatments that were developed and then buried when they thought they'd contained it." It was a glimmer of hope, fragile as a candle flame in a hurricane. The idea that somewhere out there might be answers, maybe even a cure, locked away in some forgotten government facility or CDC archive. Kevin stopped typing long enough to chime in. "We could look. I mean, we're already scavenging and surviving day by day. What if we make it a mission? Try to find other sites like Ashford Springs, look for patterns, see if there are any government facilities nearby where they might have stored research data. It was ambitious, maybe even crazy. They were just 5 people trying to stay alive in a world that wanted them dead. What business did they have playing detective with a 40-year-old conspiracy? But at the same time, what else did they have? No homes to return to, no jobs waiting, no future except the one they carved out for themselves. Tyler sat up, and even in the dim light, Jake could see the spark of determination in his younger brother's eyes. "I'm in. We've been running for 8 months, just trying to survive. Maybe it's time we start trying to actually fix things, or at least understand them." Marcus turned from his post at the window. "Y'all are talking about deliberately going into danger. Looking for infected zones. That's the opposite of Survival 101, which says you avoid threats, not chase them down." But even as he said it, Jake could hear that Marcus wasn't really objecting, just making sure they understood what they were proposing. Amanda stood up, moving to the center of their little circle. "Marcus is right that it's dangerous. But he's also the one always saying we need to think about the big picture. Right now, we're just delaying the inevitable. Eventually, we'll run out of supplies, run out of luck, run out of places to run. But if we can find out where this thing came from, how it works, maybe find research that could lead to a vaccine or a cure. That changes everything." The silence stretched as everyone processed this shift in their mission. They'd been survivors, focused on the next meal, the next safe place, the next day. Now they were talking about becoming something more. Researchers, investigators, maybe even heroes if they got lucky and found something that could help what was left of humanity. Jake sat up, his decision made. "We do it smart. We don't take unnecessary risks, and we don't lose sight of staying alive. But yeah, let's do it. Let's figure out what the hell Ashford Springs was and if there are more places like it. Kevin, you're on research duty. Dig through every file you've got, look for patterns, unexplained quarantines, towns that disappeared from maps. Amanda, you start documenting everything we know about the infection, symptoms, progression, anything that might be useful to compare with whatever we find. Tyler, Marcus, will handle security and supply runs." Everybody agreed? The agreement was unanimous, sealed with nods and quiet words of affirmation. They were still scared, still exhausted, still grieving everything they'd lost. But now they had something they hadn't had in months, a purpose beyond mere survival. As they settled in for the night, taking turns on watch while the others tried to sleep, Jake found his mind wandering back to that pharmacy, to the neat handwriting in that notebook, to the person who'd written those final desperate words before whatever happened to them happened. "Don't stay in Ashford Springs," they'd written. "The town is cursed." But maybe curse was just another word for infection, for contamination, for a disease that people didn't understand yet. And if it could be understood, maybe it could be fought. Maybe it could be beaten. Outside, the night was full of the usual sounds of the apocalypse, distant moans of zombies, the rustle of wind through dead trees, the scurry of animals that had adapted to this new world better than humans ever could. But inside the church, 5 people who'd been running for 8 months had finally stopped long enough to turn around and face what was chasing them. Jake didn't know if they'd find answers. He didn't know if they'd survive long enough to make a difference. But for the first time since the world ended, he felt like they were doing more than just postponing the inevitable. They were fighting back, and that had to count for something. As he finally drifted off to sleep, his dreams were haunted by empty towns and calendar pages marked with red X's, by zombies in bell-bottom jeans and polyester suits, by secrets buried under layers of official denial and convenient forgetting. But underneath the nightmares was something else, something he almost didn't recognize at first because it had been absent for so long. It was hope, fragile and uncertain, but real. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find the truth. And truth, in a world built on the lies of the dead, might be the most powerful weapon of all. When Tyler shook him awake for his watch shift 2 hours later, Jake rose without complaint, taking his position at the window while the others slept. The moon had moved across the sky, and the shadows had shifted, but the road remained empty and quiet. Somewhere out there in the darkness was Ashford Springs, frozen in its eternal September of 1985, its dead residents still walking the streets, waiting for the next unfortunate souls to stumble into their forgotten town. But Jake and his group wouldn't be going back there. They had a new mission now, a new direction. Tomorrow they'd move on, following the leads Kevin would dig up, chasing the ghosts of outbreaks past, trying to piece together a puzzle that someone had gone to great lengths to scatter and hide. It wouldn't be easy. Hell, it probably wouldn't even be possible. But impossible had stopped meaning much when the dead started walking. If they could survive 8 months of that, they could survive this. They could be more than survivors. They could be the ones who remembered, who documented, who fought to make sure that the truth about places like Ashford Springs didn't stay buried forever. As dawn began to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, Jake felt a smile tug at his lips despite everything. They had a long road ahead, full of danger and uncertainty and probably more horrors than he wanted to imagine. But they'd walk it together, this strange makeshift family forged in the fires of the apocalypse. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find something worth all the struggle at the end. The sun rose on a new day, and with it, a new chapter in their story. Not just survivors anymore, but seekers of truth in a world that had forgotten how to tell it. The brave human group that had explored a forgotten town filled with unseen mysteries was now ready to explore many more, armed with knowledge, determination, and the unshakable bond of people who'd looked death in the face and refused to blink. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And that made all the difference.